Put your hands all up in the air.
And we're back once again, this time a super double podcast. We've got special guests from Our Brooklyn Bites. You know them, you love them. Stephanie and Leon.
That's Stephanie, that's Leon, in case
Hello.
just in case you
Just
couldn't
think
figure that
hat
out.
and no hat. That's the easiest way.
For all of us watching on video, all 2 or 3 of those YouTube views that we love so much.
And we're 2 of them, so.
Yeah. And when I test the video, that's usually the third one.
We're bringing our 3 listeners, and then you guys are bringing your 8, and then we're putting them together.
We might hit double digits.
I think
we might hit double
right.
digits.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. That makes
the
us
perfect
0.0001 cent on the YouTube sponsored views for that. So, what we're here to discuss today is for those of you who are regular listeners, for those of you who are regulars at our monthly NAVA events at the Digital Press Store, you may have noticed that our fearless leader is conspicuously absent. He has transplanted from the fertile wasteland of New Jersey, from the toxic waste dumps and the highways of New Jersey, to the great, big, giant state of Texas, where the National Video Game Museum is going to open targeted for this spring, September.
It's,
fall.
it's probably, I think, the end of August, early September.
End
it's
of
supposed
August,
to be.
early
something
September,
around then,
yep.
something around then. But yes, the store, the museum is in the process of being completed. The exterior is set up, the interior is being renovated and properly established, and
They're running cables,
Yeah.
building walls, putting the paint
it's real
on everything. It's
it's-
for real.
this
It's
is-
really
it's happening.
happening.
And this is in Frisco, Texas?
Frisco,
Frisco,
Texas, which is
Texas.
which I think is very close to Dallas.
It's a north of Dallas suburb, apparently.
So what we wanted to do was we wanted to, in honor of the new museum, we wanted to take a look back on
Some
how,
of
what got it there. What got
Yes,
the process,
what got it
the
there,
process.
and our fond recollections of one of the men behind the vision of the museum, one of the men behind the vision of digital press, one of the men behind the vision of the community that brought us all together, Mr. Joe Santulli. So this is our tribute to Joe Santulli.
Golf clap.
Hold up clapping.
So, for me, I met Joe, about a decade ago here at the store, and it was, I was doing a trade-in of stuff that I had amassed over years of being a manager at Funko Land, and I'd left that company after the GameStop buyout, and Joe was immediately welcoming and friendly and helpful. I brought a big box of promotional merchandise and demo DVDs and CDs and PlayStation and Dreamcast stuff, and I could tell by his enthusiasm and excitement over some of that merchandise that it was, we were going to be fast friends, because the things that excited me were the same things I could tell that excited him, like cool, one-of-a-kind or kind of promo merchandise, stuff that not available to the general public, and I could tell by the things he had hanging in the store and some of the things you may see on camera or slightly off camera that you can't see, are those kind of things. And I started showing up on a regular basis, and then he invited me to come to NAVA, and for those of you who know NAVA, there are monthly events, and it was, that's all she wrote, and we've been here and part of this community ever since. So NAVA is something that even predates Joe. Leon, you know a little bit about the beginnings of NAVA. It started at an alternate store, not the Digital Press Store, for those of us who visit the Digital Press Store.
Yeah, this is hearsay for me. I've never attended one of those meetings, but I know it used to happen at Video Game Connections, which was a store that was a little further south from here, a little, in a town called Howell, New Jersey. They used to have get-togethers there. I don't think they were quite at the scale that we see here. I think it was more of a closer knit get-together for like friends, and maybe it was 12, 15 people, for starters.
Right,
And
there was no Facebook to promote
Right.
the event, to say other than walk-ins in the store who, they might deem like, hey, this is a cool person, let's invite him to the thing. I don't think they were, there weren't monthly Facebook updates saying,
Right.
hey, Nava, this month we're playing Smash Brothers. It was
I think regularly now we get at least 60, 70 people, right?
more than
At
that, I
least.
think. Yeah, at least. Yeah, and also disclaimer, everything that we're going to talk about here today to do with Joe is from our memory and hearsay.
Yeah.
So if we get anything wrong, Joe, A, I apologize, and B, you're more than welcome to call in on the next podcast and append anything or correct anything that we
Right.
get
Remember,
wrong.
hearsay rhymes with heresy, so it could be either one.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't rhyme.
Wow, it's close. It's similar.
Similar spelling.
It's a homonym.
An alien hominid.
Yes.
So Nava began at Mike Etler's store, and at some point, and for some reason, and I wish Joe was here to explain how Joe kind of took the reins, inherited it, and brought it when he had a retail location that could facilitate these kind of gatherings. He started having them at the Digital Press store in Clifton, New Jersey.
Which opened in 2005, was it?
I believe so. Yeah, it's been
10 years.
10
Yeah,
years.
that's about right.
And at the end of every month, regulars, mostly in the beginnings, I think the promotion was all done on the Digital Press forums, which we'll talk about as an accomplishment and a historical venture in the video game community for Joe. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But those regulars would come to the store, and they would bring their trade boxes, which was, I'd say it was a little bit more of the Atari era of retro gaming, maybe even some arcade stuff, stuff from their personal collections that they wanted to thin out or trade or swap with other enthusiasts. Like now, if you come, you'll see a lot of NES era, Genesis, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, N64, GameCube, and then all the way up to
Amiibos.
what's hot and new. Yeah, Amiibos.
Right.
The kind of stuff that people are scouring the toy stores for, and they want to,
It's become very like almost like a little mini flea market.
Yeah.
It's like very, very, a lot of community, like very community kind of like people have found their way of making trades and just
yeah.
finding people who were looking for their old stuff.
You guys can attest to this. If anybody who is shopping for Amiibos in the North Jersey area wonders why they can't find them at Toys R Us or GameStop or, whoever has them, it's because they're all at Nava. All of them, the kids who
This
come
is
to
true.
Nava, have every Amiibo that was released.
In multiple quantity.
Yeah,
Right.
it's insane. And, they're taking advantage of the free market, I guess. It's
That's what Nava's about.
we're seeing a little bit of the kind of flipper mentality that you see on some of those shows on, Discovery Channel, like the Pawn Stars and American Restoration and all that stuff. Like, buy something and see if you could get more for it. And hey,
I'll tell you though, I mean, when people come with their trade boxes, a lot of it is, pretty reasonable. There's not a whole lot of gouging or, nobody's looking for, to find, find a pot of gold.
Well, I would say one of the reasons for that is because Joe has created a retail environment that is so reasonable in the way that the things are priced. We've said this before on the podcast, that the Digital Press store, you'll rarely see any kind of unnecessary inflation pricing on anything. Even something that's rare, you're going to see a very reasonable market value on it. You're never going to see something where you're looking at it and it's like, oh, that's $100 more than I want to pay for it, and that's probably because the store needs $100 in overhead to sell it. Maybe they paid more than they should have for it, or they just want, to try and get more than what it's worth. But I've never run into that here. I've never bought anything for myself, and I've never seen anybody buy anything here that I felt was outrageously priced or way, way above what you'll find as general asking price on eBay or GameStop or any other store that's selling this kind of stuff.
Yeah, true enough. I think this is just collectors scooping up whatever they find and then, just bringing it here and hoping somebody else needs it, and this way it'll fund whatever they're looking to buy.
Well, there's a social aspect to it. You meet people that way, and it's like, listen, I got something you want, you have something I want,
right.
And you find a common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nava is going strong, like Mike said. We're here every month, and even in Joe's absence, it's running smoothly, knock wood. We're not hitting any bumps in the road without our fearless leader. We've learned...
The store staff is fantastic. They operate like champs.
They've been well selected to operate this business venture and keep the social events going, the tournaments, the fighting game tournaments, and the Nava tournaments, and everything that Joe has given us for the past decade, every month, like tirelessly. There are people who want to see that continue on. There's people who have stepped up and said, "Hey, we have to keep this going." Just because Joe is moving on to do something really special, we can't let the special things that still exist in New Jersey end. So, and I'm sure he's proud of that, and we're proud to have the reins right now and make sure everything goes smoothly. Something else that Joe also did with his own hands and his own blood, sweat, and tears from his own basement was a monthly fanzine, the original digital press fanzine, and I believe this was around the same time as the early Navas, the kind of basement Navas or the Navas at Mike Etler's store, was something that Joe collected from the gaming community, kind of like almost pen pal style.
Yeah, I guess it was like early '90s. I guess. I think it must have been in the early '90s.
I would imagine there's probably a lot of IRC, like chat rooms, like organizing these kind of things.
Just doing that, like at that time, must have been a challenge. Just the communication, the limits on communication.
Yeah, whether it was IRC or CompuServe or whatever Telnet like chat group or bulletin board system.
So a newsletter is like a web page, but like on paper.
In fact, there's some over there. Yeah, there's a whole stack of them. We have some of the classics. We'll take a look at those during the show and tell.
I guess game reviews, but a lot of talk about retro stuff. Even at the time in the early '90s, retro stuff from the '70s and early '80s.
Yeah, and that plays into Joe's love of underground music and kind of obscure alternative and rock and new wave music. Fanzines were like a way that those communities would talk about, because there weren't many television shows, there weren't many radio stations that would play that kind of music, so fans of underground musicians or certain acts would get together and distribute these photocopied ashcan stapled paper photocopy magazines, like at rock shows in the city, or maybe you got on a mailing list and you'd send like your subscription fee, maybe like a couple bucks, which would be enough for the person to print out the magazine and put a stamp on it and put it in the mail for you. And Joe wanted to do that with the video games, so I can't think of any. And I probably wasn't exposed to the same circles that he was when I was young enough to appreciate something like that, but I can't think of any other video game fanzine.
Well, I have a funny story about that, because during the year like 92 to 99, I worked at a game store, and it was like a local mom and pop game store in Brooklyn, and they ran. So we did a fanzine, and it started off like a newsletter, and then it turned into like a 100-page Xerox copy, wow, binded and everything that we sold in different stores. So the thing was, when I first met Joe, I told him, he was, because I told him about the digital press fanzine and stuff, and I told him, well, I did a fanzine too around the same time, and he was like, oh, he goes, that's weird. He goes, because he knows a lot of the fanzines and he doesn't remember mine. So I brought it in one day, and one of the issues that we published, there was a contest for Sega's Subterranea, a Genesis game, and the contest was run through Sega, but it was targeted towards fanzine community. So it was like mostly fanzines published this contest, and it was Name the Ship in Subterranea, and it was kind of thing like we had to, I think it was, you had to name what the initials were, like the what the S stand for, the AU.
Like you had to come up with yourself, like create a name
Yeah, like
for
it was a contest. Like whoever has the best one, they were going to give away the CDX to the winner.
Oh wow.
So, we published the contest, and then we published the results in the next issue. And this was, 1994 or something like that. So the issue I brought in, Joe was telling me, he goes, hey, I was one of the winners in that contest. And I'm like, no way. So we flipped through the issue that I pulled out, and there it is. There's all the winners. My team, we won the number 1 prize. So we got the CDX. And then Joe was like number 3 or something on the list.
Nice.
And it's like, there's your name. It's in my fanzine. It's like, that's so weird. Like back, 20, 30, almost 30 years ago. And, you were in this community and I was in this community, but we just never, before the age where internet hooked everyone up together, it was...
So you got third prize. You got like the activator or something.
I forget what he won. I'm not sure what his prize was. But my boss won the CDX. He kept it for himself. I didn't get anything.
I was going to ask if you
He
still
came
have
up
the
with
CDX.
it. Yeah. But that's almost, I guess, technically the first time I ever met Joe, even though I never did. It was just his name.
I bet the prize that Joe won was a Subterranea hat, and I bet he still has.
You know
one.
what? It might be.
Yeah.
Or
It would be
pin or
inappropriate.
Snapback Subterranea baseball cap. Yeah.
Appropriate
We'll have
prize.
to find out.
Wow, that's right. I didn't realize there were so many video game fanzines. That's really cool. How many years did you publish yours for?
It was from 93 to like 96, I believe. It was like, we started off doing it every quarter, and then we did it bi-monthly.
And did you get submissions from online BBS boards or?
No,
IRC?
we did a lot through AOL.
AOL chat rooms.
Yeah, and then a lot was through. We had our customers doing a lot of reviews for us, and what we used to do was because this was before really like computers were that powerful. At least ours weren't. So we used to buy like EGM, and we would cut all. I would have like a pile of like cutouts of the screens,
Nice.
and so whenever I needed like a screen grab of like Earthworm Jim or something, I would be like, all right, I have these cutouts from GamePro and EGM, and
Oh, and you like
I would
Xerox
just-
it with
yeah.
the.
I would
cutout?
get the glue stick, and everything was done on glue stick. It
That's
wasn't even.
funny.
Great.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and the photocopying quality back then was terrible.
It was
Like,
terrible. Yeah.
You probably would lose, like, if you pasted a color screen capture that you cut out from an EGM on a black and white photocopier, it probably just turned into mud. Like, it just looked like I can kind of make out Earthworm Jim on that.
Yeah.
Like,
I
there's
used
that
to
little
give them a
shit.
hard time because they would give us samples of what it's going to look like. I'm like, nope, too dark,
Yeah.
too light.
Yeah, I used to work in printing back then. Now it's great. Now, I mean, like,
Oh,
the
yeah.
photocopying, the digital technology is fantastic. You can get great resolution. And from what we've seen of Joe's fanzines, he would painstakingly do these illustrations, these crazy illustrations of like a giant, like psychedelic looking Pac-Man, like chasing some guy down a hallway. And it was all by like with pen and ink and on paper, and he would add it to the issue of the fanzine. So it definitely had a great organic, underground, rock and roll kind of feel to it. And anybody who's seen those fanzines, and the fanzine continues on to this day. There are, different people editing it and contributing to it, but in some way, shape, or form, there are still published digital press fanzines that go out every once in a while, maybe once a year at least, or a couple times a year. So that's a yet another Santulli legacy that lives on. And from the fanzines and from those circles of friends that he had in collecting and compiling and starting to become a historian, which he eventually would become a museum benefactor, he started these digital press collector's guides, which were legendary for years and years as being some of the first authoritative, comprehensive rarity guides for all classic game systems. I mean, in an era where all the information was out there, some of it was on the internet, the beginnings of the internet, but it was like scattershot. Maybe there was one website that had a BBS system that maybe had some files that specialized in Atari 2600, or maybe there was some stuff that specialized in Commodore 64. And Joe said, you know what? Let's get this down to a science. We will literally go through every game. I will, put my closest friends to work. We will pool our talent, pool our collections, put the feelers out. Anything we don't have, we'll get our hands on it. We'll play it. We'll write a small review of it. We'll document it. We'll gauge its rarity within the community. We'll, have a kind of consortium and figure out like what is the rarity of this game or potentially the value of this game. And for years and years and years, these were kind of the gold standard for rarity and value, especially in the predating kind of the Wikipedia era of the internet. What's the famous comic book and baseball card price guides?
Lee's?
Like
Overstreet?
Overstreet or Lee. I was thinking of Overstreet, but Lee's and Overstreet. These were kind of the Lee's and Overstreet of the pre-digital era or early digital era. I mean, I'm sure the internet was definitely around.
Yeah. I still hear the price guide quoted for various rarities and pricing estimates and so on. I mean, I know it's some people will mention that it hasn't been updated in a long time, so it may not be reflective of current pricing, but you get a general idea of where something will sit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I always run into people within these circles who always, when they interact with Joe, if it's somebody that Joe hasn't seen in like a long time, they'll always be like, "Oh, when's the next guide coming out?" And there was the classic guide, which is all the like 8-bit era, and then the blue guide, which is like the 32-bit era or 16-bit era stuff. And I think, in my conversations with Joe about the guide and the future of the guide, I believe that he said to me that we're just in a place technologically now with the internet where there's not much of a need for a paper guide anymore, and the ebb and flow of supply and demand and rarity of product these days with things like eBay and Craigslist and trading groups on Facebook, like things become desirable and rare or common, and the market gets flooded with stuff so quickly these days that it's really, not only is it difficult to gauge on a scale of 1 to 10 what the value or rarity of something is, but it could change like almost overnight, thus making something like a guide a bit of a dinosaur, or not completely accurate for a long term. And that was something, as this hobby has exploded. It's
what it is too, though. I mean, this is the type of community. The reason why they probably keep asking for the guide is even if it does change, even if there is Wikipedia and eBay and everything like that, this is just the type of community that likes to hold stuff in their hand. It's just so regardless of the question when the new guide coming out, that's going to keep going, I'm sure. It's just the nature of the community. But
they like stuff on a shelf. They like stuff on paper. They like stuff in their hands, and I can't blame them. But I would have liked to have seen us move to some kind of full digital solution for it, like an app. And I think there was some attempts at something like that a few years back. But again, it's difficult to garner support for something like that, and we're in a time now where people's availability and their ability to dedicate so much time into compiling something that is comprehensive and authoritative, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And Joe put a lot of time and effort into these, and he's got really important things to deal with now with the museum. So if Joe isn't going to do it, someone else may, find the time to put something like this together with the digital press name on it. Maybe not. if not, these at least will go down in history as like a milestone of yet another Santulli production.
Springboarding off of this, though, there is a digital version.
There absolutely is, and all of us had come together at one point in time, and we ran with the communities at the Digital Press Forums / Rarity Guide online, and that was a digital transposing of a lot of the information that was in this guide in a knowledge base of the Digital Press Forums. But as time has gone on,
It's a weighty butt.
we've kind of moved on from that. It still exists. It's a legacy that will not die. There is still I don't know if I want to use the word healthy, but there's a community still that's a part of the Digital Press Forums, their message boards, and their Rarity Guide. And it's certainly a testament to the people who have stuck with that community through thick and thin and throughout the years that want to carry that banner and continue on and support that as a knowledge base. That for, I'd say another decade when it was created in the 2000s, and it's gone on for quite some time. It's still there if you find it on the web. That became an organic knowledge base in and of itself as people would contribute commentaries on games, reviews of games and systems, explained how to modify games and systems, or the best way to repair games and systems, like anything you can think of. There were discussions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, topics being started about classic gaming, modern gaming, off-topic stuff about tangential things related to gaming. There were eBay finds and all kinds of stuff in those forums. Online trades. It was everything. It still is. It's still there, and it's something that Joe and the community again put a lot of work into building it and making it like a hotspot and a destination place on the web for people who were into classic games and the classic gaming community. And it's something that he put his stamp on, and he can no longer contribute to the production of it, the continuation of it, as he's moved on to other things, the museum and the store and CGE. But it's something that again he helped to create, and it flourished, and it still continues on. Like it's this perpetual thing. Everything he touches, it's that Santulli touch. So there's that. Do you guys have any recollections? We were all pretty active around the same time on those boards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was...
The one thing I always remembered about the Digital Press website was, like, I used to have a bookmarked in my old, like, Netscape Navigator or something.
Netscape.
And it was always, when I would go to it, it would be the Space Fury face, and it would be that music, like that.
Yeah.
And I always remembered his site for that reason. I'm like, whenever I drop that bookmark down and load it up, I hear that music, and that was always like the trademark to me of his website.
I remember the online Secret Santa swaps. I mean, like, that was something to me I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Like, that people, who generally don't know each other would be willing to either go out and buy something or give something from their personal collection to either, a stranger that's just a part of this community, or maybe potentially somebody they knew, if they knew everyone who was participating in it. But it was I think it was generally like a blind Santa thing, and you would get a package, like, as long as you participated and as long as you packed something up and sent it out to the person running it every year, you would get like a box of stuff. It might be something, if someone was generous, you might wind up with like a PSP or something. You never know. It's pretty cool.
Did you ever do it?
I never participated in it, but I would watch it every year, and I would always be amazed at
it is amazing.
the level of participation. And I would participate in the Santa things at the Digital Press store. We would run, and we still do, our Christmas swap, and we always have fun stories about those, but that's another story for another time. Do you have any fond recollections of the Digital Press forums, or?
You know, with any community, especially with a community that has a lot of old members, a lot of new members, varying amounts of knowledge per person, different amount of experience. There's no shortage of passion. There was no shortage of passion in a lot of the threads, and I think that's what I remember most. That you'd have threads, simple topics about just like random games that would go on for 10, 20 pages of people going back and forth. Sometimes it would get heated, but you know that's passion for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that it's probably reaching like Guinness Book of World Records kind of level of that My Little Pony thread that you probably still participate in on a regular basis. There's a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic thread on the Digital Press forums that's got to be like 75% of the database. Like, it must take up like so much. It's like 1,000, 2,000 pages long worth of stuff, and it's always at the top of the list of the off-topic stuff. It might as well be its own forum. They could like surgically remove that thread and like make it a website in and of itself. It's searchable database of My Little Pony memes and discussions and everything else. So yeah, there was the Digital Press forums, which still exist. And at some point, Joe said, "I this is not enough. You know, I have created a fanzine that is my heart and soul. I have created a set of collector's guides that is my knowledge, that is my brain power. I've created a forum that is a virtual community, but I must create a retail space that benefits all in the East Coast, all in the North Jersey area, like a local destination for people to buy, sell, trade, everything from Pong through, at the time, PlayStation 3. You know, like it's from the oldest to the newest. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wanted to do it right. He wanted to do it reasonable. He wanted to do it in a way that didn't take advantage of the community, that didn't make anybody feel like they were getting ripped off, didn't make anybody feel like they were paying too much, make people who would walk in with their kids remember their childhood and help share a part of that with their family. You could bring your friends and, you know, introduce them to something that maybe they'd never seen an Atari or an Intellivision or a ColecoVision game before. A place to play arcade cabinets. I mean, arcades in this area are long dead, and they were just about dying out entirely at the time that he created the store. One of the best local arcades over at the Willowbrook Mall, Fun and Games, closed its doors very close to the inception of this store. So somewhere to go, even, you know, just a row of 5 or 6 arcade machines, to a lot of people, that's heaven. Being able to go drop quarters in a machine, and he keeps them well maintained. We gotta talk to him about those sticks on the MAME cabinet, but other than that, it's got everything really. The store has everything, and Joe said he just wanted that. He wanted to get out of the 9-to-5 office job that he was very good at, but he felt that it wasn't where his heart was. So here we are. You see it every month on the Digital Press podcast, or you see a little piece of it behind us. It's been 10 years, going strong, subsisting in a community full of other retail establishments, and it's, you know, we've only been swatted once.
That's a fairly recent trend.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what we would do without it. When Joe said, you know, I'm going to move to Texas for this video game history museum thing, the first question out of most people's mouth is, what's happening to the store? What about the store? We don't care about you, Joe. The store. We got to have the store. You got to have the store. And it's here. It's still here.
It's in good hands.
Yep. So what are some of your, I don't want to, keep rambling incessantly. Feel free to cut me off at any point, but I'm sure we all have some first recollection or favorite recollection or favorite moment in the store. Like, just have at it. Like, let's hear it.
My experience is actually very similar to yours. It was 2007, and I was driving. I must have been at the Lowe's or something like that, and I was driving back on Route 46, and I saw you can't see it in the frame, but there's a big plush Sonic in the window, and it just caught my eye, and I'm like that's not a common sight in retail establishments on Route 46. So later that day, I just took a drive up here. And, I walked to the store, and it was, I was impressed with what I saw. And shortly after that, I found out that there was a website, the Digital Press Forums, and there was
My Little Pony thread.
Yeah, that came years later. But there was an Introduce Yourself thread, which is actually still going. And so I posted in there. I registered, and I posted. And Joe had, I think, responded saying, because I had mentioned that I'm from the area and I saw the store, and he's like, you got to introduce yourself. And so I came in, introduced myself, found out about Navas. And
wow, that's like Mark Zuckerberg sending you like a private message on Facebook, or Tom sending you a thing on MySpace.
That was the thing. It was very organic. It wasn't like, how many people find a store and then after that, the person operating the store says you have to introduce yourself. That was it. Joe's the type of person just wants to be everybody's friend, and he succeeds. Very often he succeeds. And I think I'm not going to say it's my best memory, because it's actually a very bad memory, but it is a memory. Moving that foul couch out of the basement. That foul ass couch. I'm on the bottom. We're pushing it up this narrow staircase. Joe's at the top of the stairs. I'm at the bottom. And I don't know how old the couch was, but...
older than the store.
Yeah, probably.
Clearly older.
Yes. And as we're pushing it up, the remains of whatever...
human DNA.
And potato chips, skin flakes started sprinkling
silverfish
out from behind the cushions into my mouth.
Why did you keep your mouth open?
Well, because I didn't know that was going to happen at the time. I'm pushing up and I was struggling, so I'm breathing heavy, and all of a sudden I got, I'm like...
The only thing worse on that
Disgusting.
scale of like...
disgusting.
Of horror...
I tasted that couch.
Would be like a human centipede moment. So that's right. The human centipede, and then directly below it is like old couch crumbs directly into your mouth.
Yeah.
That couch has some history, doesn't it?
People have...
I tasted every
on
year
it.
of that couch's history.
At least like a few children were conceived on it, I think.
And where did it end up? Was it getting thrown
Garbage?
out? Or
Yeah, I think because we were clearing out a lot of stuff in that basement, and the couch was one of those things that had to go.
So
it was a great couch. Like, you sat in it, and the springs were so like destroyed that you would
demolished.
sink like almost all the way to the floor. Your butt would you'd sink into it. It's great.
So in other words, the remains of the couch have entered the water supply.
Yeah.
Yes.
In New Jersey.
They're in a river.
encouraging.
Yeah.
They're in a river somewhere.
Yes, but it's always an experience.
So our Brooklyn compatriots, what are your fondest or first or any recollections of the store?
Let's see. Well, I think it's funny because I think I met Joe before I ever came to the store, but not on a personal level. I think I met him at an E3 one year. He was exhibiting for, I guess the beginnings or the early years of what would become the Video Game History Museum. And this must have been, I don't know. I mean, I attended E3 between 1999 and 2006 every year, and I'm pretty sure this was before the store opened. So it had to be somewhere in that, maybe that 2003 to 2005, sort of range. And I would wander into this area at E3 where all these amazing, relics were, if you want to call them relics. But, I mean, compared to what else was being exhibited there, I mean, E3 is the place where the next wave of games are shown. But meanwhile, here's like an oasis in the middle of that where the the products of the past or gaming is represented across all the years that led up to that point. So I was amazed to see like early Atari prototypes and Nintendo and Sega and everything that had been released up to then. And I was wandering through the tables. There would be like sort of a miniature version of what we would see in future expos. And there was some free-to-play type stuff where classic game consoles were set up. There were display cases. There were examples of product merchandise and boxes and collectibles, things like that. And circulating through those aisles would be Joe and most likely I think John Hardy was also
Sure.
there. And they would
Probably
come up,
Sean Kelly.
Sean was certainly there, but I distinctly remember a point where Joe and and John came up to me, and they had a stack of Pac-Man raffles from New Jersey Lottery, and
John was like, "Dude, you got to scratch
Yeah.
these off.
Sure,
You might win a Pac-Man."
sounded very much like that. But they would give you basically a trivia question. They would come up to you and they would challenge your video game knowledge to answer a question on the spot. And I wish I had an example of something they would ask, but I mean you could probably fill in the question with any number of things.
Well, their knowledge is encyclopedic, so whatever it was probably a good question.
Yeah, it was solid. I'm pretty sure I was stumped at the time. But I think I got a successive try until I finally won a ticket, and then you would scratch it off to see if you won, and maybe that was your prize basically, if you got the answer correct. And I'm pretty sure I might have that ticket somewhere
Wow.
in my stash of of E3 memorabilia that I've stuck away in like a folder or something like that. So I think that's probably my first contact with Joe on a personal level, but didn't actually get to meet him until I came to the store a few years later.
I do want to interject to springboard off that's one thing that I noticed about just in general about the National Video Game Museum and just the way the store is run, that it's not stuffy in that it doesn't it's not pretentious about the history of the
Right.
subject. It doesn't alienate people, even younger people who may not be familiar with the Atari or
Right,
even
well,
the
at the
NES.
core of it-
It's always about it's like
Yeah.
it's welcoming. It's if you don't know something, come ask. If you don't know something, it's very easy to
Sure.
find that information.
I mean, it's an
And
art form, but it's also a form of entertainment, and
Yes.
it should be fun and
Exactly.
approachable. Right.
Exactly.
But actually, now that I think about it, though, this was probably promoting CGE. This
Yes.
is what that area was originally for.
Yep. Correct.
Kind of to generate interest for Classic Gaming Expo.
CG, which predates this store as a venture, as a Santulli-related venture, by just a few years. I believe 2004 might have been. Was that the first CG?
99?
Oh, I'm sorry.
World of Atari. First
Oh, the
couple
world.
of years,
Yes. Okay.
And then it became
Yeah.
Classic Gaming Expo after that. I guess maybe 2000 was the first one.
Was it 2000? Okay.
Or somewhere
Again,
around there.
our memories
Yeah.
are
Yeah, it's
where
fuzzy.
all of this stuff is. Most of it's documented. I mean, there are official databases online where we could have taken better notes, but
Yeah.
that's not our style,
Yes.
man. We're like off the cuff.
That's what Google is for.
Yeah, Google's for like all those stuffy scientists and intellectual types. Not us. Steph, what do you have for us about the store? About
So the store. Okay. So this is like late 1990s, and I used to come to the store because it was a toy store before it was
Outer
Digital
Limits.
Press. It was Outer Limits.
Yeah.
And no, I didn't live around here, but I had a friend who did, and I would hang out on weekends. We'd hang out, and she lived nearby. So back then, I was very into collecting like toys and going to like toy shows and stuff. And so the store Outer Limits looked fun and had a big sign. We'd come here a lot, so I was very familiar with this location. And so now they closed down at some point, and I stopped coming to New Jersey for a while. And then it got to a point where I think I was dating. I always wanted to go. I heard about these video game meetups, and I've never been to one. And I always wanted to. I was very nervous because, like a female, I always had this mentality of like, awkward guys, socially awkward, and it's going to be like I'm going to be the one token girl in this group of like old guys who like Atari and stuff, and I'm not going to fit in and all this stuff. So I was always very nervous about doing it. So there was one day I think it was on the Digital Press website where he posts events and gatherings and things like that, and Joe would post the monthly Nava meetups, and one of them was I followed it every couple of months and I never had the courage to go. And then one day, I was dating this guy, and I was like, hey, do you mind come with me to this gaming thing? Keep me company so, I feel more comfortable. So I was like, all right, cool. And then I looked at the month, and it was, I think it was an Atari, retro gaming contest or something. That was like the contest for
The
that
random
day.
retro?
Yeah, the random retro, that's it. So I was like, all right, I think this is the one I need to go to. And then I realized it was in the...
In fact... Isn't your name
My
up
name
there?
it used to be. I don't know if it got recycled off it.
No, it's there.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Oh, yeah,
the random retro champion.
So that was actually a different one, though.
Oh,
That was, I think, a couple months later. But the one I finally convinced myself to come here, especially after I realized it was the former Outer Limits. I was like, I have to check this place out. So I came over here, and Joe, I don't know if Joe knew I was coming or not. I might have, because I didn't know him at all, but I might have posted a message like, hey, is it okay if it's safe? I forget if I ever did. But I popped in one day, and I went up to them, and I was like, hey, I want to sign up for the contest. You're playing Atari. And, I was kind of like, no one knew who I was. Who was this girl going to play Atari? Everyone probably had no idea. So I sat down, and they specifically, like, put me up against, like, a young kid and stuff, and I beat him.
Viciously defeated.
Yeah,
the 4-year-old.
It turned out, I surprised everyone. I think I lost anyway. I didn't win that event, but I made it to like the final round, and then that's how I got to meet Joe. Because then, afterwards we talked, and I told him all about me. I'm like, yeah, I'm like a huge fan. I love Atari. It's great to meet you. I know you run all the message boards and stuff, and that's kind of like the first time. That's how I met him, and then. One of the things that struck me about him was how open he was and friendly. Like, someone who doesn't, he had no idea who I am. Like, why would he even care who I am? And he was, like, genuinely, like, interested to hear about my life and, how did I get here? What brought me here? What did I do before? All this stuff. It was like, oh, this is, like, unusual. Usually, why would a store owner care anything about that? But, yeah, and that rubbed me the right way. And that made me, like, a monthly regular now. This was in 2009, so this is a while ago.
I remember that day that you came for the first time. I was there, and there was also.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were there.
Yeah, there was a.
You were my photo.
There was a guy that did you beat me in the random retro? Probably. I know I didn't win. I've never won.
Steve Jacobs. I know that was one of them.
Yeah, I think Nick might have won the first one.
I can't remember which. I do remember a few random retros, but I'm mixing them up. Like, I played Outlaw, I think, at one of them.
I remember distinctly, though, there was one guy who was a semi-regular. I'm not going to name names, but he was a semi-regular at the time, and he was your prototypical... If you can imagine, like, that cartoon caricature of, like, the video game bro, nerd, basement dweller, neckbeard...
I'm trying to remember.
Like that kind of dude, like who can't possibly get beaten by a girl, but at the same time would immediately fall in love with one that beat him. Well, that happened at that random retro.
Wait a minute, I think I do remember this.
Was it that one? It was the same one.
It was that one, I think. Yeah, it was the first one. He was like, "Oh, I can't believe I got beat by a girl."
I think I do remember
But
this.
then he
was
was
that
like-
the one that you won though? Is that the one later?
That was because there was one.
There were two that were very close to each
I
other.
remember now.
Oh well, if
Yeah,
it wasn't
I
that one,
don't remember which one it was.
then
but
they were really close together.
Yeah.
Then they were like within a month or two apart, or maybe like that same year. But there was one where you
I do remember.
you handed it to him in the game, like you just completely wiped him out, and he was like
The crowd
verbally
started,
like
the crowd
oh,
went,
oh dude, oh I can't believe I lost to a girl. But then he was like, oh, I'd really like your number. Like, I was very impressed with your skills. Yeah, he stopped coming for whatever reason, but probably still had something to do with that crushing defeat by Stephanie. Just never recovered from that, I don't think. But the Random Retro, for those of you who don't know what the Random Retro is, it was a yet another trademark Joe Santulli event where it would be a case full of Atari 2600 games, 2-player Atari 2600 games, that he would not explain the rules, pop the games in, and you would have to compete one-on-one with whoever your opponent.
It was done like double blind too, wasn't it? Wasn't it randomly? He was literally randomly picking it. Like
the
not
selections
even
of the games were random,
Yeah.
and it would be like, you don't know how to play this? Oh well, too bad. So, the one game where you only use the button on the paddle. Which one is that? Canyon Bomber, I think. It's just a button. All you do is you push the button as the ships are flying over the canyon, and they drop a bomb.
It's all timing, yeah.
Yeah, it's all timing based. You could throw your opponent off by saying like, "Oh, you have to like spin the paddle like nonstop." You could fake them out. So there was a psychology to the Random Retro tournaments. You might be able to get away with something. I know
people
that
holding the controller upside down. That's always
The Atari joystick.
Yeah.
the first year that you and I went to Classic Gaming Expo in Vegas, you and I were on the Digital Press team against Atari Age, and we were both in the finals, and we took the prize for Digital Press. We beat Atari Age, which is another. There are a few hallmark database / community websites out there throughout the years that have subsisted, that have become important knowledge bases, and we'd be remiss to not acknowledge Atari Age as one of them for the classic gaming community. Digital Press is right up there, though, I think, at its peak, anyway, of activity and prosperity. Atari Age, Digital Press, maybe Nintendo Age, or Sega 16, whatever those sites are. Digital Press was right up there as a go-to place.
There's a lot of cross-pollination with the users.
Yep, absolutely. You talk to somebody on Atari Age and you say like, "Oh, blah blah blah, Digital Press," and they'll know exactly what you did. No explanation needed.
Yeah. People use the same handles even across the.
Yeah, I was actually more of a lurker on Digital Press's forums, but on Atari Age I was kind of a regular. So there were people I used to speak to on Atari Age, like John Hardy and people like that, who went under different names because you didn't use your real name, and I didn't know that until much later on. I was like, well, I never really, I never visited, never really posted in there, but I used to write to you all the time. You're this person. I'm like, I had no idea all these years later.
Yeah. So, and then we move from the mecca of the Digital Press store into the most important creation that Joe has ever had, the Digital Press podcast. And here we are. You're listening. You know what it is.
It doesn't get better than this.
It hasn't gotten any better than this.
When did we start this?
2009 maybe.
Yeah, something.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
We're certainly not the most regular podcast on the internet in terms of production schedules, but we try, and we're not making any money off of it. We're not, we probably don't have many listeners, but for those of you who do tune in for whatever reason to eat up some time on your work week or on your commute or whatever you're doing, we thank you. And we thank Joe for participating and for guiding this ship clearly to classic games. We were a little bit scattershot all over the map in the beginning. We didn't know what our focus should be, but Joe had the right idea. He said, let's just talk about classic games because that meets a need that satisfies a community that is focused, and it's what we need to be. And here we are, and we're never at a loss of opinions when it comes to classic gaming. I don't quite have as strong opinions on the modern stuff. Something new comes out, that's great. But you ask me what my favorite game on Commodore 64 is, I'll be able to tell you that in a heartbeat, and I'll defend it.
What's your
to
favorite
the
game
death.
on Commodore 64?
Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, baby. Why has Telltale not picked that property up? Come on. There's more than just Sam and Max and Monkey Island. Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders. It's a LucasArts classic.
I have to look into this.
Sounds like a Kickstarter in the brewing.
Yeah, you've never played it?
No.
It was like right after Maniac Mansion. It's like the second Scum game. It's great. It's got cool, funny characters and globe hopping, globe trotting, like Indiana Jones style. It's great. It's got that early LucasArts humor, or Lucasfilm. It was Lucasfilm Games at the time. Yep.
But yeah, we've started this podcast, and I think we cataloged pretty much the entire run through the Video Game History Museum, the National Video Game Museum. We covered the Kickstarter.
Yep.
And we covered we interviewed the three. We interviewed Joe, John, and Sean.
Yep. You can go back in the archives, and if you haven't seen those episodes, they're available for download. Yeah. So
And
go.
now, here we are, ready, waiting for it to open in another 2 months, about 2.5 months.
Yeah, pretty much. We're almost there, and then soon we'll be traveling down to Texas and seeing the doors open and seeing everything that everything for version 1.
Mhm.
We know what we're going to see is going to be the seeds that will grow into something bigger. But we're prepared for exciting things to start, and none of this would have happened without Joe Santulli, and the communities wouldn't have happened, or not in the same way anyway. The store wouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have, as far as I know, not every single year at the Digital Press store has been massively profitable. Not every single year has been, a banner year in terms of the industry giving the community something great. But Joe has his head in it. He really will do the right things to keep it moving at whatever cost. I mean, he's obviously a smart businessman. He hasn't personally gone bankrupt. He hasn't had any need to downsize. He's kept a lot of balls in the air, juggling a lot of things. And
Yeah, I mean, let's also mention Classic Gaming Expo, where that has also been going, year after year. I mean, maybe not on an annual basis, but at least periodically, and often at the personal
expense
of the
people
organizers.
involved. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joe has made it no secret that Classic Gaming Expo is not something that they run to line their pockets with cash. They do it because they love to do it, and because it's fun for everybody involved. It really helped establish them and allow people to see the beginnings of the Video Game History Museum on a small scale, just like a warehouse-sized room full of some of the most exciting things in their collection that you could walk up and examine. You could touch most of the things, for what it's worth. And that's...
I was thrilled this year at Classic Gaming Expo, or last year, I should say, to finally embrace an Atari 1450 XLD, the pinnacle of the Atari 8-bit computer line that was never released to the general public, that was only available in a handful of federated stores, or internally to Atari people.
Did they have it in their giant Atari sales kiosk, Atari computer sales kiosk?
No. In fact, it was among the other Atari artifacts that I think an 800 was in the kiosk. The kind that you would see at retail.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I was able to experience it in person. It was an enlightening moment.
Yeah, I remember participating in 2 CGEs, helping to set up and organize the museum rooms. Those were, very, very labor intensive. There's just so much stuff in their archives, so much physical materials, so much hardware and software and
A lot of styrofoam.
marketing materials, a lot of styrofoam, a lot of packaging, and me and several other people worked tirelessly throughout the night, almost till dawn, setting everything up, and it was great to set it all up to what we thought was the best way, or the right way, or the way that would be most appealing visually, and to have the Video Game History Museum staff, Joe, John, and Sean, walk in, look at everything, and say, dude, this sucks. It's all wrong. And then you just watch them, take a step back, watch them go like whirlwinds, like the friggin' Tasmanian devil, go through the room and like rearrange everything. Like just they must have like the Terminator scanner, like RoboCop, like beep beep beep. Like they could just like look at a huge table full of Atari merchandise and just be like, this should go here, this should go here, this should go here. This came out before this. This was, more rare than this. This is more important than this. They know it all, and they just sweep through the room and fix everything.
Just in tune with each other.
Yeah, I mean they've done it so many times at this point, and they know. And I'm sure that some things that we consider ourselves expert at, or historians of, or experts, we could probably do similar things with certain things in our collection. If somebody came in and said like, "Oh, what's this?" or should this go over here? Like we'd know, like, well, this is the first Game & Watch ever
Yeah, we know
released.
like the timeline of things.
Of
right?
things, like they know everything. They know everything, and it's amazing. They are the right people to be running this Video Game History Museum or National Video Game Museum in Texas, and we're thankful that
and they
it's them.
sacrificed a lot of their collections to do this.
Yeah, stuff that was on their own, in their own rooms of doom or on their personal shelves. I mean, imagine people listening to this who are enthusiasts, who might have your man cave or your room of doom or your bedroom or your game room where your most prized game possessions are. Imagine having to pack all that up in boxes, put it behind glass somewhere for the public to see every day. I mean, on one hand, that's a really cool thing, but I mean, you love those things. You love looking at those things every day. When you get up every morning and you go to bed every night, you love looking at your prized, maybe you have a Nintendo World Championship cartridge, or maybe you have, some rare Sega Genesis release, or some repro, or something that, that you won in a contest, something that's significant historically that should be in a museum, as Indiana Jones would say. And just imagine parting with it all for the good, for the greater good,
Letting other people with their grimy hands touching your stuff
yeah,
in a public setting.
or staring at it with their grimy eyes. So,
Do we have any good stories about his hats?
Joe's collection of hats is legendary. The Acclaim. Anybody who knows Joe knows that he would be wearing that Acclaim hat. Acclaim was one of his favorite, if not his favorite, video game company of all time. And the classic red and black. That was Joe's hat. So speaking of things to do specifically with Joe, we put a call out to some of our community members and friends and family and NAVA regulars and forum members and people who've known Joe through the years, and they had some things to say and some things to share personally about Joe. So here's a few things from the Peanut Gallery. Our first message is from Gabe. Gabe, is one of our podcasters here. He's been busy lately because his wife is going to have a baby, so he's been on pre-daddy duty. But we'll probably have him back on the show at some point. So Gabe wrote, and he said, "I have a quick little anecdote for you. 2 years ago, my birthday fell on a Sunday."
We have a call.
Before we get to Gabe,
How do we-
we've got a caller. Hey, caller, you're live on the Digital Press podcast. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Nick Goebel calling from the sunny Sunshine State of South Dakota.
Whoa, South Dakota.
Yep.
What time is it there?
It's just an hour back, so it's 6:20 right now.
Wow. So, do you have a story about Joe Santulli that you'd like to share?
I have two Joe Santulli moments that I'd like to share with the group today.
Okay. Let's hear them, Nick.
All right. So the first one is actually both pretty close to when I first started working at Digital Press back in August 2010. And we had someone come in. At the time we had, I don't remember the name of it. It was a Genesis peripheral where you wore a vest just to be like force feedback. Do you guys remember the name of that?
The Interactor?
Yes, the Interactor.
Yeah, Interactor. Okay, I thought, but I wasn't sure. So he came in and started asking questions about it. Joe and I were working at the store. So he's like, "How does this work?" And Joe said, "Well, there has to be warning on this. I must have forgot to put one on it, but I think it's one of the earlier models that got recalled." So Joe just kind of gives me a look, and I pick up on it immediately. Like, "Yeah, some of the really early models of this, I remember hearing about people getting bruised chests. One kid even got like a hole punched right through his chest from wearing one of these things. You really got to be careful with them. And so we're just like bullshitting back and forth with this kid, and we're having a blast. And eventually, I think he ends up buying it anyway, which
Not a smart kid.
really hope he didn't believe us then. Who knows? But
That kid was never heard from again.
That was part of the fun of working with Joe. I mean, you got to bullshit around, and you like to have fun, and that was some of the best parts of it. There were times when the landlord would come in and he hadn't met me yet. I'm working with Joe, and Susan asked me, "Are you Joe's son?" And Joe just threw his arm around me. I was like, "Yes, this is our son, Nick." So we just kept going on like that, and that's two of my favorite Joe Santulli moments.
Yeah. How did you survive? Didn't you get killed by Batman?
I came back. I got better.
Oh, okay. Lazarus Pit?
So they had the Lazarus pits. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Wow, Nick. Well, thanks for calling in and sharing your story about Joe. Are you excited about the museum?
With me?
What's that?
Do you guys want to share a story with me?
Oh, you can stay on the line, yeah, if you want to listen. We're gonna tell stories. We're about to tell a story from Gabe when you so rudely interrupted. But let's tell the story from Gabe now. So, this is an anecdote from Gabe. 2 years ago, my birthday fell on a Sunday. It was June 23rd, and we had a podcast session lined up. I was having a pretty shitty day aside from the podcast, but after we were done, Joe and the rest of you guys surprised me with a birthday cake. A pretty rare event for me, and completely turned my day around. That, in my opinion, speaks volumes about the kind of man that Joe is. He's been a brother to me, and he's brought us all together. And that's true. Yeah.
And Gabe is a brother to us.
Yeah.
So.
Gabe's a bro. And Gabe's wife, Elena, wrote in that while she doesn't have a specific story, she wanted to share that Joe made the store very welcoming. She's not a gamer, but she is married to one. And as a result, often there would be conversations going on where I was in way over my head. Joe always made a point to fill me in layman's terms, so I understood what was going on. That went a long way towards making me feel comfortable versus being lost at Digital Press. Yeah, and I think we touched on that with Nava. Was great for making people who, you could bring in a novice, and it could be overwhelming to see 60, 70 people all talking about what was their favorite game on the TI-99 computer, but, you could ask them, and no one was going to be elitist or a
people
jerk.
come in, and you can tell they're kind of like over their heads, and you're like, I was here once too, and then just,
And working at the store, you must have had that experience as well, explaining things to people who didn't know what they were looking at, right?
Right, Nick?
so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's part of the fun of it, because then you get to explain, this is what I really like, what other people like, and, it never felt like when I was working there, like I was trying to be a skeevy salesman trying to push things on people, right?
No, you do that in your off time.
Or, because of the way the store was structured, the way that Joe set everything up, it was more like, we're a community. It's like, let me introduce you to a bunch of people, hey, come on, play some games with me, and we'll talk about what we like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much more relaxed. It never felt like a store.
Joe is excellent at knowing how to build a community. Kind of as soon as he's got like a radar for somebody who would be a great fit, and even some people that I, as kind of like an acolyte of Joe, would say, I don't think that person's a great fit. And Joe would say, no, I know that person would be a great fit. Just bear with us. And like within a couple Navas, I'd be like, yeah, you were right. Like even those initial moments of me kind of being turned off, like you could see the chess game like 5 moves ahead where I was ready to bow out and surrender the piece.
I think you've used the terminology extreme personalities before, and that is
Yes.
it is very accurate. It is not an inaccurate description, but that doesn't, it's still a very welcoming place.
So here's a story from Nicole, yet another legacy Digital Press employee who had good things to say. Nicole's fondest memory of Joe: I was a fairly fresh hire. It was my first retail job. I was a little skittish and a little intimidated by Joe because, well, wow, he was my first boss. I'm anxious about perfecting the use of Excel spreadsheets on our system and using the point of sale. It only took a couple weeks to understand Joe's vibe, but his customer interaction is really priceless. If he wants to be your pal, he's going to be your pal whether you like it or not. So in comes a customer asking Joe for a 360 controller, which was hanging on the highest hinge up above the island. Joe takes the claw grabber to get it down and asks the customer, do you want me to ring that up for you? And Joe says, no, I got it. While still holding onto the controller with the grabber, he proceeds to ring up the customer entirely with the claw grabber, punching the keys, closing the cash drawer with the claw grabber, and then handing the bagged controller along with the grabber to the customer. The guy didn't know what to do. He just had this totally bizarre look on his face, didn't utter a word, and Joe goes, here you go, have a nice day, grinning cheek to cheek. Not only did I bust out laughing once the customer left, but it was little moments like that I feel really had the employees understand Joe's character. He was passionate about his job, welcoming, and just a little silly. So, yeah, I have a great story to tell at the end of all this about me and Joe and customers and hanging out in the store. So here's another story from yet another employee. We see a trend here of Joe's employees having the best story. So here's one from Andrew. My story has been mentioned before, but it's when Joe and I drove to South by Southwest, which was very recently. They went down promoting the museum. We left early to avoid a big snowstorm, and then, of course, we wound up getting stuck in the middle of it in Virginia. So we drove for exactly 5 minutes before we had to stop at a smelly, stained Ramada Inn until the storm blew over, and we watched Hotel Impossible all day.
The old couch must have been at that Ramada.
Probably. In Arkansas, we were stuck in dead stop in traffic for 4 hours, and I almost hit a disabled vehicle. Good times, best boss I will ever have. I'm sure Joe is the only boss I'll ever have stories about like this. And seriously, where else will you ever have a job where you drive through a snowstorm going to the South by Southwest Festival to run a video game history museum stand? Like,
Not many.
not
Yeah.
many. Do you have
I
a?
can probably go off the line, let some more callers get in.
All right, Nick.
I did want to
Well,
pop on. I
thanks.
miss all you guys. Hopefully I'll be able to see you all soon.
All right, thanks
Yep.
for calling, Nick.
look
Anytime.
out for
Take care.
Batman. Bye bye. So, Mike, do you have a Joe specific story, like some personal way Joe touched your life, or touched you in a way that made you feel uncomfortable?
The I told the couch stories, but I'm sure part of Joe
You never
touched my
recovered
digestive
from the
system. I'm sure
couch.
part of Joe touched my digestive system that day, but I think the big thing too, and this is also pretty general, not because so my a lot of my memory of the event sort of run together, but what has always been pretty consistent is that Joe had a knack for not just making friends with people. He also has a knack for making his friends with people. So it's like, if I'm at a NAVA or anything like that, he would be like, "Hey, Mike, did you meet so and so?" And then you would more or less try to make sure that everybody was friends, that everybody sort of got to know each other, recognize each other's faces, and just very welcoming. And it's through Joe that I met so many other people, everyone on this panel, and lifelong friends. And it all comes back to the fact that there was a store that I just wandered in one day. So it's pretty amazing how things can happen, just serendipity,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess following on kind of what you were saying, I've when the store first opened in 2005, I discovered it. I'm not quite sure. I think probably just an online search looking for video game stores. I think I was just on a kind of a road trip mentality. I wanted to go out because, living in Brooklyn, it wasn't particularly local, but, saw that this place had opened up. And I knew about the store because of what Steph mentioned with Outer Limits. I used to come to Outer Limits in the 90s when they were around, because they had a lot of, during the height of my action figure toy buying phase. But I was surprised
He
to
probably
see this.
bought a lot of things from my ex-roommate, I'm still friends with him to this day, but he had blonde, spiky hair, very pale.
Used to work there?
Yeah, Rob,
Uh-huh.
his name was.
Okay.
He always had a lot of, like, earrings in.
Right.
Kind of looked like a punk rocker guy.
Yeah,
He-
well,
he was a regular employee.
very likely. But so I was surprised to see this great new store had risen in the ashes of Outer Limits, I
I
suppose.
know, yeah.
So I hadn't been coming to the store. I used to frequent Nava here and there, but I didn't really socialize a whole lot. I would just come to just sort of just take in the atmosphere and just kind of see what was happening here. And after a few times of attending, Classic Gaming Expo had come up, and I was also in a bit of a convention attending sort of a spree at the time. And even though I didn't really know anyone here, I knew a lot of people from, sort of the gathering that happens here. We're going to be attending Classic Gaming Expo, and this was back in 2007. I kind of expressed that to Joe. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like a great event, but it sounds like you guys have a great party, but I don't know. I don't really know anyone. I don't know if I'm going to get a lot out of it, And he says, no, you got to come. You got to come and experience it. It's such a great time. It's a big weekend party. You think of it as, don't think of it as a convention. Just think of it as like a big hangout, and it turned out to be a great time, Went there and, I knew a few people from here. I recognized, like Mickey, who used to be quite regular at this place, was there and, helped make me feel comfortable. And, had a great time. It was a good all-around experience, and it was great to see the wonders of Vegas as well. So that was certainly an experience, too.
Steph, do you have a Joe story? Anything specific?
Not too specific. One other thing, I'll make a note that there's a Star Fox spaceship hanging from one of like the mobile things.
There is.
So I donated that to the store after I met Joe. I was like, if there's someone, I was trying to get rid of the thing and I couldn't sell it, and I was like, I know it's like valuable, and I was like, I couldn't find a collector to give it to. And once I met Joe, I was like, I know it's going to be in good hands. Let me give it to him. So I walked in the store. I still didn't know him at that point. And I was like, Joe, I want you to take this. I can't give it to a better person.
Yep, there are several standees that I donated from my Funko Land days. There's a Resident Evil 3 counter standee there. There's a Rival Schools counter standee.
Yeah, I've seen that.
There was a medieval one. I think it got destroyed, a PS1 medieval. And there's an X-Men versus Street Fighter counter standee. A lot of the PlayStation 1 era counter standees I had taken home from Funko. And your story reminds me of a great story, which also will lead into my story about Joe. One of the counter standees that I had given to Joe in my collection of promotional merchandise was Metal Gear Solid for the PS1. It was just a basic square cardboard standee, nothing fancy. There was no pop-out cardboard. There was no like figure of Solid Snake on it. I think it was just like a kind of bland image of his face, and it said Metal Gear Solid coming soon, PS1. And a customer had come in and asked, "Is that for sale?" And Joe recounted this whole story for me, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know," because I think a part of him was like, Frankie gave me that. I don't know if I should sell it. And, he's like, I'm going to sell it, but I'm going to make it worth it. So he's like, I don't know. I don't own the store. I have to call the store owner. So Joe would frequently play this like character where he wasn't the owner of Digital Press to people who would come in the store and inquire about things or ask if something was for sale. And I don't know exactly what was behind that, but he took great joy in it. That's all I know. So I think I might have been in the store for this, or maybe I came into the store later that same day, but he recounted the story for me that he called his wife at home and she knew to go with it, but he said, "Oh, hey, I have a question about that Metal Gear Solid standee that's in the store. I was wondering if you'd be willing to sell it." And his wife's on the other end like, "Oh, this is like something with a customer, right? Should I just pretend, just listen? Okay. All right, I'll just listen to you as you go on, and I'll just pretend like you're talking to me." And oh, how much would you be willing to sell it for? Would you be willing to sell it for $100? Would you be willing to sell it for $100? And like the price went up. I think he wound up selling the thing for like some ridiculous amount of money, like $200. And which is not to say that the thing isn't worth that much. It's kind of a rare piece of merchandising that was only sent out prior to the game's release on PS1, before the game became like a big phenomenon, before the game became a million seller. So it's not like those things exist in great numbers. So maybe it was worth $100. But he talked his wife through this like, whole thing on the phone and like pretended that she was the store owner. And another time I was in the store and someone had come in and asked a question about I think maybe if they could like work at the store over the summer, maybe if there was jobs available, or if they could get intern credit for their college. Some question that like Joe just thought was so amusing. He was like, "Oh, well, you have to ask the owner." And I happened to be like in the store walking around, and they were like, "Well, where's the owner?" And he points at me, and he's like, "Yeah, that's the guy over there." And they come over and they're like,
"Go bother him."
You know, so I knew if Joe was passing these two, I think they were two young girls off to me, that he didn't want me to give them like employment applications. He expected me to just improv on the spot and come up with something that would, you know, not take the wind completely out of their sails, but, you know, come up with a great story. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to have the hours to employ anybody else this summer, but, you know, why don't you bring back, you know, if this is for college, like, bring me a one-page, like, written thing about what, you know, what you'd want to do if you were to intern here, and I'll see if I can..."
You gave them homework.
I essentially gave them homework. I can't remember exactly what it was that they wanted. I know it was something that I couldn't approve. I couldn't just like say like, "Oh yeah, fine, you have a job." So Joe wanted me to give them the runaround, and he thought it would be amusing to put me on the spot. Which reminds me of an epic story of something that Joe did to one of his employees that worked here, a guy named Mike. A local newspaper reporter came in and asked Mike if he could give an interview about the store, and Mike called Joe, and maybe I'm getting it backwards to start with. This is a horrible start to a story. Maybe Joe was in the store and the interviewer came in, and Joe did not want to give an interview because he was maybe not having a good day or didn't feel like it was anything that was worth his time. So he called Mike and said, "Yeah, I have to call the owner of the store and see if they'd be available." And he put Mike on the phone and made Mike give an interview. And then the interviewer got what they needed and left and came back for follow-up questions while Mike was working. And it was stuff that Mike didn't have the answers to, and called Joe and was like, "There's interviewers in here, and they recognize me from the phone call, and they're asking me questions." And Joe's like, "Well, just keep playing. Just I'll feed you the answers and whatever." And it got to a point where like the jig was up. The interviewer knew something wasn't right, and Joe was put in a position where he eventually had to tell the interviewer. And Joe, if you're listening to this podcast and you'd like to correct anything, feel free. But at some point, Joe had to reveal to this newspaper interviewer that like he was in fact the owner of the store, and that the first time the interviewer came in, that he was brushing her off because he either thought it would be funny or didn't want to be bothered, or put Mike through all this hell of like answering all these questions and then getting confronted by the interviewer in person. And it was great. It was just like, and it was so typical. Like Joe would just do these things off the cuff and just roll with it, or see where it would go. And I'm sure there's a million times throughout the decade that the store has existed that Joe has thought it would be amusing, or just, you know, would make his day brighter to do something like this. And that was the kind of guy he was, and the kind of guy he still is. And I'm sure as the museum opens, there will be plenty of opportunities for him to, there'll be someone walking through the museum and he'll have an opportunity to interact with them, and he'll ask like, "Oh, who runs the museum?" And he'll point to his wife, who'll be working, at the museum also, and say like, "Oh, she's the person who came up with the whole thing," and put her on the spot, because that's just the kind of person he is. He enjoys watching people suffer. So, yeah, well, that's pretty much all I have, and I've certainly taken up a huge chunk of time rambling on about Joe and everything that he's done. Do you guys have any other thoughts, final feelings, or closing sentiments? No.
Don't have anything.
Yeah.
We love you,
I
Joe.
think
just wanna-
we should leave it on the human suffering part.
Yeah.
That's-
I think we just want to wish him well in Texas, and may the National Video Game Museum be a smashing success.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but Joe, we're gonna come follow you, and we're gonna be there. So
Yep.
you try to run away, but you
Yeah.
can't get far.
Yeah, we'll come down there soon, and as soon as it's open, and
We'll
we'll
talk about what we see, and
It'll-
I'm sure we'll have an episode about it.
Yep, it'll be like old times with old friends at NAFTA. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for everything that you've done, and best of luck in Texas. If it's not already, full steam ahead. So,
Yep, absolutely.
thanks for listening.